Welcome back to another Bartok developer vlog. I'm going to call this one bartokv0.4 preview, and I'm going to talk about a lot of different things, but I'll try to keep it pretty short here. Um, First of all, I'm migrating to a service worker, and it's sort of like a dynamic service worker paradigm. It's basically taking the same idea that I had for the Bartok server and moving it more towards the service worker, or applying it to a service worker. There's some really cool stuff, and if you'd like to talk with me about like all the cool stuff that you could do with that, I'd like to get into it, but I'm not going to go into it right here. Short answer is, though, you can get a lot faster loading and all the things you see here offline. And then it's a huge paradigm shift in the way that the files are handled and the UI services are instantiated. There's a lot of editor improvements. Go a little bit into those with the, I'll say editor improvements, but maybe just kind of overall. I'll go into the state of that here in a little bit. And then there's a few things I've been playing around with and preparing WebAssembly, this whole idea of opening a local folder, and been playing around with CSS 3D versus SVG 3D. Before I go into any of that stuff, though, I think I'll just go ahead and go into some thoughts. So I kind of thought about doing this video before I actually had some code in place. And, well, I have a lot of code in place, but before I have something that I could solidify into release, I think the release concept kind of like puts a little bit of stress on me. I don't know. I make a lot of lists, make a lot of notes, and it winds up becoming this super massive structure. This idea of like, I'm going to have a lot of this stuff done, or I need to do a lot of this stuff, or I need to prioritize a lot of this stuff. It's incredibly stressful to me, just to look at those and actually think that I'm going to get a lot of those done like anytime soon. But I also try to hold myself to this idea of like, hey, I want to make some progress. Anyways, that massive structure of notes, list, ideas, uh, I don't know how well I can tackle it. So it winds up being, kind of uh, sort of like a stress to me. I get anxious about not being able to do that stuff, and I want to see it done because I want to use this tool and I want to play around with this tool. Um, I really, I really strongly feel that this system that I created could help me like move faster and be less worried and have less friction. But the thing itself causes me friction and worry and not being able to move faster. So I'm going to go into a couple things that have kind of stuck with me over the ages, over the like days, whatever. XKCD, I'm not like a XKCD head. I'm not like one of these people who's going to be like constantly linking you XKCD thing, and I don't think that they're gods, but I do appreciate what they're trying to do. In this one particular chart in particular, like has kind of stuck with me. I'll tell you, whenever I shared this with people that I thought were reasonably intelligent, they sometimes had a hard time kind of understanding what was going on with it. But the way that I understand it is this is an effort at someone trying to understand whether or not you're spending too much time on something, or you've spent more time on this thing than what it would have saved you in the first place. So you basically look at how often you do the task over the course of 5 years. They're going to do the math on how much how much time you could spend on automating the thing before you wind up spending more time automating than you actually would have spent just doing the thing. So, for an example, if you do the thing 50 times per day, and your automation shaves 5 minutes off each time, so that's 250 minutes, then over the course of 5 years, you would have saved yourself 9 months. But if you wind up spending more than 9 months on doing that, then you've actually spent more time um, actually working on the thing to automate. So if you can get the thing done in 7 months, then you've saved yourself time. You've saved yourself time over the course of 5 years. Anyways, it's still a little bit complicated, and I feel like there's a few things that it misses. For instance, sometimes those automated tasks, you have to ask the question: was it even possible to do this this thing that I wanted to do before I automated it, before I created something that made it so that I could do it. And I can offer an example like with visualization. Was it possible for me to visualize this thing beforehand? I didn't even have a way of like grasping the concept. Was it possible for me to deliver the quality that I would get if I had a clear mental model of what it was that I was trying to create and how the pieces of that thing were connected to each other? Anyways, after a certain point, my brain starts kind of going away from this, and I start thinking, there's more at play here. I tend to think it's along the lines of heart. Like sometimes we believe in something and we do something, regardless of whether it made a lot of sense to do it. And I think it makes a lot of sense to do that, to follow your heart. And so I think this guy is the one who made uh, command line automation tool, um, Brew. And I found out about him because he was complaining about something, or somehow found his way to Hacker News. And okay, so I'm reading his tweets. Um, and basically, the idea here is like we get distracted and we hate ourselves, or have problems with each other or ourselves because of those distractions, and we wind up building stuff that maybe we didn't set out to build in the first place. And here are some people saying, hey, you know what, sometimes you just start out building the a thing and it winds up causing you to build something else, and that's okay. So there's an idea. I'm not going to beat that one to death too much more. And maybe I'll just go ahead and start talking about the current state of where Bartok is right now. So I'm going to show a cool demo here in a little bit. Uh, Basically, I found this other guy who's doing this thing that I'm doing, and he's doing something similar. And I've reached out, tried to contact him. I don't know if what I want is to work with the person. I do know I don't want to say, hey, stop working with Clojure script and start working with the style of JavaScript that I'm using. I really don't want to force anybody or push anybody to work on something that's different than what they're working on. I'm happy that they're independent. Um, and I also understand that like people don't have maybe like the mental energy, their mental like resources to connect with people like this. But here I am making a thing, and other people are making it too. So the reason I'm saying all that is that guy was using IndexedDB, using this thing called local forage, and he also had some really cool things going on, like um, he's interested in making tutorials for people or making things easier for people. He's also had some cool ways that he had put together the thing that he put together. So I took a bit of inspiration from that, and I was like, okay, I'm going to just go ahead and at least start doing some of the things he's doing and get that in place. Beforehand, I was essentially just using uh, local storage, and what I really wanted to do was use something a little bit more robust or a little bit more fitted to the situation. Sort of just bit the bullet, and I went ahead and wrote a service worker and an IndexedDB connector for this thing. So what's kind of cool now, and I don't really have a or I don't have like a diagram for this, but what's really kind of cool is you can call to that service worker, and you don't really have to write everything into the service worker. You call to that service worker and say, hey, listen, anytime someone requests something uh, from the server, you're going to intercept that, and you're just going to return something from the IndexedDB. And also, service worker, you're going to be able to um, I'm going to be able to pass you code, and that code is something I want ran whenever someone calls to /foo. So that'll be a foo handler, and it runs code sort of like service worker code within there. So I basically have very accessible and kind of dynamic um, service worker infrastructure kind of set up, and that's cool. What that let me do was it let me say, hey, the files that you're caching for making this Bartok UI, just give it to me as a UI. And towards the end of the video, I'm going to try to show you. I've at least got reading working on that. At some point, though, you should be able to pull up all the code that makes this front end, which I've up to this point been calling Bartok, but surprise, I'm going to call it something a little bit different. So Bartok is going to be the overall system, and the front end is going to have its own name too, and it's going to have its own URL. Anyways, at the end, I'll show you what it's like to at least read Bartok in Bartok. Hopefully, it's a live demo, so maybe it'll mess up. I've still got some things to do, like I'm wanting to upload binary files and upload an entire folder from your local storage. I have a demo for that one that I had talked about earlier, open folder demo. And then once all of that's complete, basically I should be able to say, give me this markdown file, but run it through the template engine and give it to me at this URL. So I should be able to share a markdown URL to someone, but say question mark preview equals true, and they'll actually get the HTML output of that. Like they would get the templatized version of that instead of getting the markdown that you see over in this pane right here. So they would actually get this right hand side instead of getting the left hand side. Unless, of course, I said I wanted them to see the plain markdown. That's kind of cool. And that's pretty much what pop-out preview would be. Right now, whenever the preview is rendered, it takes something takes this code and in JavaScript memory sort of pretty much translates that into, hey, here's the source of this iframe. And in the future, it'll be, hey, here's the URL that you access for that, and that URL will be question mark preview, and that'll pop into here. It's a lot more flexible. Anyways, I'm working on getting all of the things remembered. So moving on to panes here. What I'd like is that whenever I do a page refresh, that this pane position is actually memorized. Currently, and I've done some work on getting the panes to actually work properly. I basically have to go in here and explain it to you. So, like, basically, the panes weren't resizing properly. Like that editor pane kept on screwing up or whatever. I did some work to get that in line. But what I've noticed is whenever I hit refresh, I have to go back and reposition the pane the way I want it. Say I wanted this thing to be like really wide here or whatever. I don't have this in place yet, but following on soon, I'll be having these panes remember their size, given that the window is the same width or whatever. So that's something I'm working on. The one of the cool things, and this is gonna kind of lose my place in the preview here. If I hit, okay, yeah, this is a new splash screen that I have too, so that's kind of cool. That'll also do the loading. And then I have to say really quickly that you notice that on the left there was some open folder, open service kind of thing. That shouldn't be showing up, but in the future it'll show up if you've already closed out all the services. And then you see the preview that gets loaded up is from the default file, which is React to do. But in the future, that would actually just remember the file that I was already on. Now you'll notice though that the tree actually remembers where I was. So if I click on there, now we're back to where we were. The preview doesn't remember where we were. So I have to basically like unlock and lock it again. So now let's go back to where we were. All right, so yeah, basically I'm trying to get all this stuff like remembered so that the actual editor itself is actually more usable. So anyways, that same concept, apply that to panes, apply it to the preview, apply it to all the stuff you just saw so that if I hit refresh, then I come back to the same place I was. I also am working on, as time allows, the right-click menu that you had there. I won't be able to get that in the preview pane because that's an iframe, and without some serious work, I'll have a hard time having the right click there. But I do have it up on the header up here, so there's the terminal content text, and you can see that I haven't really even done anything with that one yet. what I'm really trying to work towards is I like to be able to, if I remember everything, and let's say I've opened up a lot of different files, I want to be able to get to a point where I can say right click there and just close all of those, but not quite there yet, and not far away, but working on that. And then I'd also like to get it so that if I close out all of these files, that it basically gives you that cool, like, hey, you don't have any files loaded, this is what you can do kind of point of view, or thing that Visual Studio has. Same thing with if I somehow close out this service, that there would be that thing that you saw flash up that would say, hey, you want to open up a new service. Anyways, cool templates match based on tag and file contents. What I'd like to do is, if you see on some of these files that I have these little tags up here, I want to be able to say, if I tell you inside the file what kind of file it is, then use a particular template. As it stands right now, I'm basically just looking at the extension and saying, oh, this is Markdown. Then we want to use the Markdown template, which is over here, MD. All of these extensions map up to something. D3 graph is a little bit different because it actually looks at a something in the JSON. I'll give you an example. If we look at file examples and look at graph D3 JSON, we'll see that we have file type graph over here, D3 graph, and when it sees that, it basically it does a D3 graph as the template has set out. So yeah, I won't go too much further in demoing that, but a couple of things that are cool, like issues with the editor loading are kind of gone with the whole service worker thing. I don't have the line and the scroll position remembered whenever you refresh, but that's something I'll be working on. And then with the service map, as it stands right now, it's in a pretty sad state. There's nothing there. That's with the service worker version of this. That'll be coming. And then I don't really have any terminal or server kind of things to talk about right now. But if you look, the line and the column, whenever that changes, it used to be just the file type changed, but now the line and the column will change, kind of giving you a more consistent thing. I really, really, really want code folding and being able to search, but search is a kind of huge one, and code folding I think I can do reasonably quick. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So that's the status, and I wanted to kind of give a couple things that I've been playing around with, and I'm also going to talk a little bit more about that guy that I found that was doing cool stuff, like similar to what Bartok is doing. So let's just go to, and this is all live on the site right now. Let's start with WebAssembly, and I'm going to unlock this preview over here. So here's a relatively innocuous thing that actually is getting me closer to innocuous looking thing that's getting me closer to something I've been kind of like having on my to-do list for a long time. I want to do this WebAssembly thing, and I also kind of really am interested in WebAssembly for server-side stuff. So what you're seeing here is essentially like a module is being created, a WebAssembly module is being created in plain JavaScript. It's using this thing called binarian, and binarian is making that module. It's basically assembling, I think, the way that, the same way an abstract syntax tree would be assembling it, like, or be patterning it. So basically you say my module, and then you go deeper into the module and create a tree and say this is what the module does. All of that just basically to do this hello world example, which from JavaScript lets you say I want to add 41 to 1, and that comes out to be 42. This is the text version of the WebAssembly that is created, and then that gets compiled down to an actual binary file, and that binary file gets loaded into the Chrome's WebAssembly module loader, and then from there you can create an instance, and the instance can be called here. So instance exports this add function, and so you can add it. It's not very useful if you're just trying to do addition and subtraction, but it's pretty huge when it comes to like, hey, what if I wanted to do something like pretty math intensive or processing intensive? Anyways, that's the beginnings of that, and I've had fun dabbling in that. Um, Another thing is this idea of opening a folder. I have absolutely no idea which folder this is going to be open to, but cool. Okay, so on my desktop, I have a folder um, called one. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to say upload. I hate the fact that I have to say upload here and that I get all these warnings, but now I get a file tree, which I could actually load that file tree over as a service. So if you can see what I'm trying to head towards here, I'm trying to get to a point where I can just have the editor function the same way that Visual Studio would work. And I may not be able to fully implement this without like going to something like uh, more native kind of. The name is slipping my my brain right now. Um, the headless Chrome thing that everybody loads their apps into and delivers to people. I don't know why I'm having a problem remembering this right now, but yeah, I may have to go towards that and not be able to offer that functionality for the web only version of this. But also, I could do the same thing using Node and having someone point the instance that we have here to a Node server that would be able to open up files and folders and things like that. Anyways, so yeah, opening folder, that's something else I'm working on, and I'm trying to do these tests here. Amazon is talking over me. Damn you, Amazon. And damn all the people making loud sounds when I'm trying to give a demo. Ah! I live with people. Um, so there's also another experiment I'm messing around with, CSS 3D, which is like, why am I doing this? Well, I haven't actually ever went like into 3D kind of stuff with CSS yet, and minus I think I've used Z transform kind of deal to kind of force the uh, layout to use the 3D engine versus whatever else Chrome uses or whatever else the browser uses. There's little tricks you can use to force your CSS to be rendered using 3D, but I haven't using your 3D acceleration, but I haven't actually went terribly deep into it. And for some reason, I needed to like figure that out. So I've been like playing around with this. So this is what bartok actually lets you do. You are actually able to just create some HTML, and over here you have the preview, and that's sort of a live preview. You can go in and you can change things, and it automatically updates. So if you wanted to change that X to blue, it lets you do that, and that's the thing that this other guy made too. And the thing that the other guy made, we're going to go into file examples, and we're going to check that out. Um, so in here, there's this SVG, and that's a cool SVG. That's pretty much done all through SVG. And it was kind of a pain in the ass. And maybe at some point I'm going to do like a whole like second part to what this guy did or whatever. But let me just go and show what this guy actually did. So we're going to open up a new tab, and we're going to actually come out of full screen. And this thing's called Sling Code, and it's pretty cool. It's kind of basics, made by a guy. I mean, I don't mean to be insulting. It's not kind of basic in the sense that like it's not awesome. It's pretty awesome, but it's made with a to be sort of basic in this in the front end, so that like it's very accessible and easy for teaching people, and smaller in size and that kind of stuff. So he basically went through this whole how do you make a solar system, and he's basically doing exactly what I've done already, like this sort of HTML, and there's a preview over to the right, and I think this is really cool, and I really like what he's working on. I really like some of the directions he's going with it. I got inspired after looking at this because as you can see, he's like making a planet, and then he basically makes the planet go around. Maybe I can press play on this one. Yeah, see, it's going around, and I'm like, man, I'm really inspired. What if that was actually like what if you could actually rotate that behind the planet and make it kind of have like sort of a 3D feel to it. So basically just went into it and started doing my own version of that. And there's my own version just because I got inspired. I will tell you one of the restraints I set for myself was mainly sticking only to SVG. So you have SVG up at the top, whereas I think he went into using SVG and using some CSS on the outside. And he also packages everything into an HTML file. And I wanted to be able to say, what if I just open up that SVG in its own tab? Could it stand alone? So I pretty much stuck with like just sticking with SVG. And yeah, if you want, you can go through and look at all these different links I had to go through just to kind of like, I'll just say like this thing's pretty powerful, but there's maybe reasons that people might want to actually use something real, real 3D, or maybe even just use CSS for this. And so that brings us back to the test that I was writing, this whole CSS thing. I was basically just trying to get my feet wet a little bit with seeing how CSS would work. The cool thing about this is one of the things that I am interested in exploring with Bartok is what is the proper abstraction, or what prices do we pay for certain abstractions. And you can see like an example here of I chose the abstraction of sticking strictly with SVG, and I paid the price for it. You can also see maybe if I build out this CSS version, I can say with CSS I have less lines of code, blah blah blah. This happened, that happened, whatever. It's Bartok is basically about like exploring what prices we pay for the abstractions we do, and having this sort of like open playground world where you can easily go in and just see the actual differences between those two abstractions. And I also think that Sling Code is probably like that too. And I say you should definitely check them out. Look for this cool name, Sling Code. Way cooler than Bartok as far as the name goes. And now that we're talking about names, I'm going to jump over into what I'm thinking about naming this new version of Bartok, which is essentially like the front end. I'm going to keep Bartok being the overall system, and maybe more like the backend server. But I'm going to move to, you can see in MS Paint, this is me like fugue.dev, fugue f. I watched this movie called Color Out of Space, and there was a name for magenta in that was called forgot the name of it. That's two things I've forgotten in this video. But and then I went over to domain name search, and long story short, I wound up with this thing called fiug.dev, and I think that's where I'm gonna like basically put what of as Bartok right now. That's going to be the front end. So the front end sort of lives on its own instance of Bartok, and it's called Fugue. A fugue, if you look at my YouTube channel and watch the playlist for Bartok, it actually like recommends sometimes this video called "What is a Fugue." You can check that out. That's kind of cool. I thought the name was cool, and I thought the sounds were kind of cool, like fugue, fugue, fugue. I don't know. I think it's cool, and I get to use an umlaut with it. So it's only 4 characters, fiug.dev, and I think that's probably a pretty dang good way of going at this. So let's go backwards and look at what I said I would talk about in this video. So we're talking about a Bartok version 0.4, and I'm calling this 0. I think I made a mistake in the last few videos. I said v0.31 when actuality it would actually be v0.3.1, but whatever. I'm reneging on that one. So I showed the playing around, preparing open folder, CSS3, editor improvements. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers the majority of the stuff that I set out to talk about. And I just want to say thanks for taking some time to watch. And if you have any kind of like, hey, I have a question about this or whatever, I'm usually pretty open to it. I don't know how you'll get a hold of me. You can leave a comment or whatever. I'm more than happy to talk, and I'll probably talk your ear off if you haven't guessed already. Anyways, that's where Bartok is right now, and thanks for your time. And I just realized that I had promised to show Bartok within Bartok, and I didn't do that, so I'm just going to come over here and make that happen real quick. Hopefully, live demo. In case you don't know, live demos are doomed to failure. So, because I don't have everything connected, I can't go over here into terminal. What I would really like to do is, yeah, you see that didn't work. I'd like to read the number of services that are there using the terminal, and basically get a list of all the services I have running, and and switch the service right there. But that's not happening because I don't have everything hooked up. So what I'm going to do is go over to local storage, and I'm going to say the service that I'm on is service number 0. Service number 0 is the Bartok service, and or we would call it the fugue service. And I also have to go over to session storage and delete the tree cache because it's going to use the tree that was there beforehand. And I'm going to get a warning saying there's no tree built. Anyways, check it out. I think this is pretty cool. So there's a service manifest that pretty much says these are all the files that I need to make this. This is what you would use if you were going to compile all this down into a single JavaScript file or embed it into one HTML file. We have this is kind of cool, Bartok logo. Oh my god, I can't even show PNGs. But that's something I want to do in the future. Anyways, these are all the files that it takes to make this fugue front end. We have the action bar defined here, and the action bar is this left hand side thing. We have the context menu. All of this is possibly editable if I get everything hooked up. So you could change Bartok from within Bartok. I think that's pretty cool. I have the old method. Why am I having a hard time speaking today? Message of the day. With actual picture of Bartok in here, Bella Bartok. So yeah, these are all the files that make up Bartok as it stands right now. And I say a lot, and I wish I could not, but I keep on doing it. I should say so. If I say so, it makes me sound more intelligent because this is how intelligent people talk. There are a lot of icons in here. These are basically icon mappings that let us know what kind of file we have and how to set the icon. Anyways, a lot of this will be restructured as I move over to Fugue, and I probably will offer a version of this that's compiled to one JavaScript file and some resources, or one HTML file. That would be cool. That's another thing that the Sling Code guy does. Chris, I think is his name. There's the service worker HTML. There's the normal HTML that gets loaded up. Anyways, it's Bartok within Bartok. And whenever I get this hooked up again, I should be able to do a read, and I should be able to read the 777, which is the welcome service. So you'll be able to switch over like really quickly without having to do all this stuff right here. Like, remember I said I had to delete the tree, and I had to change the last service that I'm using. So I'll say 777 for that one, and we'll do a refresh. Bartok says, let's go. I'll say Fugue, let's go in the future. I get a warning saying, hey, I don't have a tree. And there we go. We're back to the React to do. And I'm just going to I'm going to do a normal zoom on this so you can see. I can say that with the zoomed in version of this, it actually kind of looks a little bit cartoony. But I would like to go into like something I've been using this for. Check it out. I've been using this to keep track of my to-dos, and in the future, my goal is have everything that I use to create Bartok right here within Bartok, so I don't have to keep a Visual Studio Code window opened up, and basically that I can keep track of and map out different ideas that I have on the fly within Bartok, and maybe even do cool 3D stuff like that within Bartok. I think that would be cool. And also, like I said before in other previous videos, just go through and do presentations that are not just, Visual Studio Code looking stuff. But yeah, that's what's